Okay, and we are live.
Okay, super. All right, hello everyone, good afternoon, and sorry for the delay getting started here. We were having some technical difficulties, which I'm on record saying was all our fault and not Colleen's fault. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to start us off with a land acknowledgement, and I would just like to invite you to close your eyes, plant your feet firmly on the floor, and imagine down beneath the carpet or the concrete to the ground beneath you. And just take a moment to give thanks for the ground that's holding you up. In Anchorage, this is the land of the Eklutna Dena'ina, and we offer our thanks to the generations of Indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land on which we are grateful guests, and to those who continue to care for and protect it. So with that, my name is Francesca Dubrock, and I serve as Chief Curator at the Anchorage Museum. And we are excited to be sharing Colleen Firmin Thomas's live stream with you today. She's been our virtual artist in residence for this past month of June. And I just want to acknowledge that we're very grateful for the support of the Rasmussen Foundation and the Alaska State Council on the Arts for their support of this program. So Colleen was raised between her Gwich'in community in Fort Yukon and Fairbanks. As a child, she says these communities often seem to represent two opposing worlds to which she belonged, both the Indigenous side of her heritage and the non-native Western side. She considers her mixed media paintings as fluid explorations of her experience living in the space between two cultures. Colleen received her BFA from the University of Alaska Fairbanks and has exhibited her work throughout the state in group and solo exhibitions. In 2018, she was the recipient of a Rasmussen Foundation Individual Artist Award. And before I turn it over to Colleen, I just wanted to say that these sessions are intended to be very informal and moments for people to interact with artists and to learn more about their practice and to ask questions. If you have questions about her materials, about her process, about her background, please don't hesitate to ask. Just type them in the chat and I will relay them to Colleen as she's working. And I think she has a little materials demonstration set up for you, and then we'll just be doing a kind of informal Q&A about her work. So with that, I will turn it over to Colleen. Thanks so much for being here today. Oh, you're muted still.
Okay. Thanks for having me. This has been so fun, and I've loved sharing more about my work. So I'm Colleen Firmin Thomas, and I grew up in Fort Yukon, and I live in Fairbanks now. And I thought I'd demonstrate what most people ask about with my work, because my work is mixed media, and I use a lot of materials that are not normally found in paintings, and like moose fur and beads and quills and a lot of paper and patterns. So that I get a lot of questions about that mostly. So I thought I'd show how I apply the materials to a surface, and this is my surface. And I mentioned in one of the posts that I like using these sewing patterns. At first, they helped me get over my fear of a big blank canvas staring at me. And then I realized they have so much potential, and I use them because when I would paint on them, they would show that brown color the patterns have, and it looked like tanned moose hide to me. So I really liked working with them for that reason. And they still give me a lot of inspiration. So I'm still using them. So I had this one that I've been working on, and this is all working out. And I put moose fur down, and then I got carried away, and I kept putting moose fur, and I didn't let it dry so that you could see how it looked dried. I just kept working. But this is moose fur. If you can't see it, I can push in. I I apply all this stuff with different kinds of painting mediums, and mostly I use this gloss varnish, gloss medium, like a paste medium, like lots of synthetic mixing mediums for acrylic paint. And it's kind of like a glue, but you can mix paint into it and change the color. But it's kind of exciting too, because I never really know how it's going to look when it dries. Like I've kind of, by now I've figured out some stuff, but there's also this element of surprise to it. So I like that too. So I was going to show you how I put quills onto a surface. And I wear gloves for this.
Colleen, you mentioned, I just want to ask a question as you're sharing. You mentioned when we were speaking earlier that you prefer to use materials in their raw state. So rather than say like dyed or prepared fur to use in its natural color. Could you talk a little bit about that and why you prefer to work that way?
Sure. I have some moose right here that I like working with it because to me it's just more wild. It's just more organic. And I started out with this interest in beading, and when I looked at it, I thought I always preferred just the materials. I thought the materials are beautiful and where they came from were beautiful, and they represented so much rather than the finished piece, which is beautiful. But I just thought, oh, I really appreciate the elements that make this up, and I want to highlight them and showcase them more. And I just like that kind of the feel they bring. There's something about seeing a quill and moose fur and all these and bones and stuff wild that creates a feeling just like a more, I don't know, I feel a connection to it more than I did when I did bead sewing. That's me. So I have like this moose fur that somebody gave me, a family member from after they got a moose. And you can see like, it's all pretty crazy looking. I don't do a ton of cleaning to it. And I actually like that kind of, I don't know. I like that element that it's as close to nature as I'll get to a moose alive. And it's got a lot of surprises in there. But yeah, I just like that raw element of it. And I just appreciate the materials, and I wanted to work directly with the materials and showcase them. So that's why I do this. And it all started with a piece I made from a BFA show that looked like the tabletop, my mom's sewing tabletop. And I just remember thinking, oh, I thought that was beautiful as a kid, that seeing those materials laid out, getting ready to work. So I recreated that the way I remembered it. And that just started all of this. And I still get lots of ideas from it. So I have quills like this. And it's time consuming, but I like to pick through and pick exactly the quills I want. And maybe you can see up here on my shelf, I divide out quills based on different qualities, and different pieces require different qualities. So I try to do that ahead of time, but if I don't, I'm searching through quills like this, and I wash them individually usually. I've tried to like wash them in batches, and this was easier for me because I had to do, it just was more time consuming the way that I was doing it. So, and I've taken to trimming the tips of them off now that I have kids that keep interrupting and coming in. Just makes me feel a little bit better that I've trimmed the tips off. But I have to throw those away carefully. So I have a jar that I cut them off, put them in the jar. So finished quills, cleaned. Ones that I've picked especially are like this. And I mix whatever the mixing medium is. This is, I think this is matte medium. And I just put it right on there. So there's a ton of layering in my work. And it takes a long time to get a piece finished. So I did this layer of paper, and then I put paint over it, and I might put a lot of paint on it. I might not put very much. So that could take days just to get a workable surface that I want to work on. And then slowly adding and letting things dry in between. So I have a lot of paintings going at once because I have to let things dry and then come back. And it can take me a long time to finish a painting because of that process. And then when that element of surprise, like I don't know how it's going to look once it's dried. I can't guarantee. I might have to spend months working on a piece. So this brush is actually pretty big for this purpose, but so I add them on, and they're not going to stick the first time. They're just going to be kind of tacked on there, and then I just go slowly. Like this is way too big of a brush. I go pretty slowly, laying things out, stepping back, letting things dry. So demonstrations are kind of hard to do, but I'm happy to do it.
Colleen, I'd never considered this before, but if you spend hours getting your quills affixed to the canvas, and then you decide, as I think you often do, to go in and layer paint over that, do you ever get to a point where the painting on top really isn't working for you and you have to scuttle all the underneath work you've done? Or do you just keep adding layers until you're happy with it?
It totally depends. I've had it go both ways. But you know, I have a hard time. I don't throw anything away. Like a good artist. That's what I tell myself. I just keep it. And I've had paintings that I've had for years that I brought out and been like, I thought this was a failure, but we've had enough time apart and I can do something with this. And I've made them into successful paintings. So yeah, I've had them go totally off the wall, but it's a fun challenge though, to just be like, I don't know where this is really going. I have an idea what I want it to look like, but usually if I just kind of follow the flow of where it's going, where it's leading me, those turn out to be, in my mind, better paintings, the ones that I enjoy the most. And whereas if I have a painting that I like whip out and it all turned out exactly the way I designed it and planned it in my sketchbook, usually those don't give me as much joy. I don't, I guess I like a challenge. So I've had paintings that are probably 3 paintings deep. And if anything's ever hanging in my studio too long, it's in danger of being redone because I can't help it. So
That's great.
Yeah, so that's how I do the quills. I'd be happy to show more, but they have to, that was it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I think for people who have seen your work, that and for those who haven't, I encourage you to look at, I'll throw Colleen's website here in the chat so that you can take a closer look at some of her paintings and hopefully have a chance to see them in real life at some point. I think she's got a show coming up in Fairbanks.
In August, I do.
August, so. And then what about the fur? Is it the same general process to incorporate that into a canvas?
Yeah, it is. Fur, I really like the texture mousse fur. It's easier to hang on to, easier to work with. Like I've tried other kinds of fur and they're so fine. It just kind of sticks to everything and I haven't had much luck. And then adding paint over some of those, they get really lost, but mousse fur holds its own there against paint and But when I pull it out and look at it, there's lots of stuff in there. And there's different kinds of, I could talk about fur for a long time, just to warn you, you're gonna have to cut me off, but there's so many different kinds of fur. Like this is really short and it's white, and this is a moose. And then there's these really long, giant, dark hairs, and yeah, it's got like fuzz and creatures living in there. And we can see all this fuzz. So it's fun to work with. And I have on my wall divided up all the different kinds of fur. And usually I try not to clean them too much. I don't want them to dry out too much. I don't clean them until I need them. But applying this fur took, if you can see that's what this is here. It's almost hair by hair because when it gets into clumps, it gets harder to tack down, and I'm missing hairs. And I don't know if you've ever seen, I made a piece that had, it was like a house or a shelter, I called them, made out of just fur. That took forever, but I love doing it. But it took like putting on layers and layers and layers of fur. I wish I had a picture of that. Yeah, so it's pretty time consuming, and it gives you a lot of time to sit there and think about what you're doing in life. So I enjoy it though.
That's great. Maybe now would be a good time to ask you to tell us a little bit more about your mother and your father and how their different perspectives and pastimes sort of influenced your work as an artist, because I know you have a pretty intimate connection on both sides of your family to some of the materials you use. And were inspired specifically by some of your mom's work as well.
Yeah. So my mom is Gwich'in, and like I said, that first piece I made was just inspired by her beadwork. And she's a very creative person. She's a school teacher, retired school teacher, and she was always just doing stuff. So I think seeing her creativity and how she just always had an outlet for it really inspired me and my siblings to do that too. Like my brother is an artist and he's a musician, and my sister's a singer, and just that, having that feeling that you can be creative, you can try different outlets, and it's fun and it doesn't hurt to try. Really encouraged all of us. And but she taught me the basics of beading when I was little. And actually the first thing I made had quills on it. It was just a string of beads and quills, and I have it still. My grandma had it and gave it back to me, and I think that's pretty neat that there's quills in there. And then my dad is a trapper, but he grew up in Anchorage, and he decided that he wanted to be a trapper when he was a teenager. So he went to Fort Yukon and ended up not leaving. So growing up, I got that close-up look at animals and where these materials come from, and death and life, and how it all goes together, and how we take what we need and how we give back. And I think that for me gave me a love for the materials, and it also gave me an appreciation for finding beauty in things that are hard to look at or hard to acknowledge. Like we don't always want to acknowledge where our food or what we have, where it came from, but to be up that close to it gave me an appreciation for that. And also just, I think in the bigger sense, the fact that my dad was so committed to his goal, his dream of being a trapper, really inspired me to work, to commit to finding something I love and working towards it and doing it. But also that I saw that it took a lot of hard work and planning and time on his part. And I saw that, you can make your dream work, but you have to work. And I think that had a really big impact on me, that, it's okay to have a dream, and it might not look like other people's dream, but you can do it, and you can do it well. Just, yeah. So that was a big impact. But seeing all that, seeing the animals skinned and prepared, and then seeing where your food comes from, had a big impact on the way I still think about painting, and the way that when I'm putting things on a surface, I'm thinking about where it came from. And I appreciate the work that it took to get to my studio. Yeah, I think about that a lot.
That's beautiful. Thank you. What, an amazing influence to grow up around, both your mom and your dad. So in terms of how you source your materials, I'm imagining you get them from friends and family. Do you go out and source materials yourself as well? I know we did a virtual artist share with Emma Hildebrand earlier this year, and she spoke about using so many quills in her work that she sometimes is now buying them off of Amazon. So I'm just curious, in this day and age, and maybe even in COVID, how do you get your materials and process them?
I have been very fortunate that a lot of people have given me stuff, and moose fur lasts a long time, one big giant moose. So I've had lots of stuff given to me. My quills I've never had to buy online yet, but I've bought them from like local beading stores and stuff. But the past few years, it's all been roadkill porcupines. And just this month, I posted online that somebody had given my cousin a porcupine, and we just spent time getting the quills off there. And that was amazing. We got so many. So that'll last me a long time. But it's all been like through connections and gifts, and my own roadkill finds. So
there she is.
Okay. So it's been really fun to see what people will give me, and people I don't know have given me quills. And I think people like that connection. I think they like feeling like they're participating in it, and it's fun. It's fun to share with people. And yeah, that's kind of a fun part of it that most people don't know, is that, I get so many good stories from people when they give me stuff, and I really appreciate it. Haven't had to resort to Amazon yet.
That's good to hear. Keep your friends and family busy. So, you, I think, came to your schooling part of your art practice when you did your BFA as a printmaker, and did your BFA in printmaking. And there is so much kind of patterning and repetition of pattern in your paintings. I'm just curious if printmaking is still a medium and a process that you feel connected to, or that you think about as you're painting, or if you've kind of moved away from that more.
I love printmaking. It just became, couldn't do it as well with the kids and not having a lot of access to stuff that I needed. And so printmaking feels like a whole different need than painting does for me. It's more precise and technical, and I enjoy that part of it. And painting is a bit wild and hairier for me. So I do think about printmaking a lot, and my designs are so different from my prints to my paintings. But the inspiration is the same, I think. And the repetition is definitely, I think, from printmaking, because I do use a lot of patterns and lines, and I see it. It's there. And so it's kind of cool when people can see that, and because I do love printmaking, and one day I will own a press one day. So I'll get back to it, but it is on my mind.
That's great. So, and I'm sure for viewers who are less familiar with your work, but if you scroll through Colleen's website, you can see that many of your works are quite abstract, and they sort of have allusions to sort of landscapes or maps, and but often they have quite personal or emotional titles. And I'm just curious to hear you speak a little bit about how you title your work, how you think about sort of these ideas of interior and exterior as you're making your work, if you have a concept in mind before you start work on a painting, or if it sort of evolves through the process of making it.
Okay, that's a big one. And
It's a big one. You can take it out in chunks.
Sorry.
It's okay. You've got a little studio helper.
Yeah, come here. Okay, go. No. You need to run.
I want to watch a movie.
You can't right now. Okay. Meadow. Mute this. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's very common. This is all part of normal virtual sharing.
And it is, I feel like my kids are super used to Zoom now too. And they're like, oh, I want to get in on this. So how I title and okay. So painting for me is very, it's kind of the way I work. It is the way I work out and process a lot of stuff. So when I'm painting, I'm thinking a lot, and usually a title is an idea floating in my head, or I have an idea what, like I'm thinking about it. So that specific painting, whatever I'm processing, and it comes out in the title. And because my pieces are so abstract, I enjoy trying to give a more fun title or some kind of insight through the title. Just give somebody something, because I am thinking about a lot of different things. I'm not just putting materials on a surface and for no good reason. To me, it's all symbolic, and I'm working through a lot when I'm painting. So like last year, when we were all locked inside and we were all doing distance learning and so much was going on, sitting in here trying to paint in the limited time I had, just was really hard. And because I usually paint in the quiet, and I rarely even have music, and it's just me and my brain. And that was really hard. I had so much going on in my mind, and even trying to use the way that I usually work things out didn't work for me. Painting wasn't doing it, and my paintings got dark, and almost, there's one of them that's difficult for me to even look at, because I remember painting it and the feelings I was painting when I painted it. And I've had people tell me that they couldn't look at it either, which is very interesting that comes through to people. And I mean, it makes me happy that I'm reaching somebody, but I don't want them to, I don't want them to feel pain or, yeah, it's an interesting thing, but it was kind of cool to see that that was coming through, that we can speak to people through what we create. And yeah, it was just really difficult. So I actually just stopped painting for a while, and I was sketching and doing other things, but yeah, it was too difficult to sit there and be alone with my thoughts too much. So yeah, so those titles, they really do mean what's happening in me when I'm painting, and they really mean something to me. And I am trying to speak to the viewer. So I think I answered most of that.
You definitely did. And I think that's something that I think a lot of people felt with the pandemic too, of there was this idea that people might have more time somehow, or be able to dig deeper into things that they wanted to do. And I think for so many that really was not the case, and it was a creatively very frustrating time.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought the exact same that everybody was, and I couldn't even read a book. But it's interesting, the sketches that I make, I'm still from that period, I'm still working them out right now. I'm painting. So there's something that will come out of it. It'll be interesting to see what it looks like though. But I don't have any more painful to look at pieces as of now. So
Colleen, I wonder if you might just share, if you're comfortable. I don't know if you're in a situation where you could hold up a finished or in process work for the camera, but just share an example, or just describe to us an example of a work you've made, and sort of the idea behind it. So folks can get a sense of it, for perhaps for people who aren't as familiar with your work.
Okay. I can grab something if you don't mind my screen being blank.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So this piece is not finished. So it's always hard to show people stuff that is not done yet, because it won't look like this when it's hanging on a wall or anything. This is what I've been working on for a while, just because I step away for so long and then come back. Maybe if I put under here, can people see that? So I have a lot of these. I use sinew and make shapes or designs with them. And sinew is the tendon of an animal, and they have a synthetic version of it too. But I make these circles a lot, and I think of them as little snares, like a rabbit snare or a snare to catch an animal. So to me, they mean a lot of things, because it represents food and it represents survival, but it also can be, a metaphor for things that ensnare us, and things that we get caught up in or drag us down or suffocate us. So it can be that too. And I don't always like to tell a lot of that stuff, because I don't want people to be stuck on that idea when they're looking at one of my pieces. I want them to look at it and, get their own, get something for themselves from it. Like, what do they get out of it? Not just, I want it to be open to interpretation for people so that they can make it their own, the viewing experience their own. But so the quills in there are just part of the idea of being ensnared, and that's painful. But, from that pain, there's beauty, and we are fed and we grow and we get stronger. And we don't have to be ensnared if we're aware. We don't have to go down that path. And when we look, we can see those things before we get there. So that's one of my pieces that I'm working on. And there's lots of layers on this. So it looks, I'd say it's not halfway done. So if I hold it up, it's not all the way there yet. And I usually just paint till I feel like it's done. So I don't know where this one will go, but it's been exciting so far. So that's a good sign that it's getting somewhere.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's beautiful to hear you talk about the ideas behind them. Does that one have a title yet, or is it?
It doesn't have a title yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
I'm curious, with having your art be quite integrated into, a sort of network of friends and family who are bringing you materials, and also speaking pretty intimately to these two cultural sides of your family. I'm curious, since you've showed your work in a lot of places in Alaska, how your work is perceived by your Indigenous and non-Indigenous family and audiences, and what reactions to your work has been.
In general, I think my work is always surprising to people. Especially if they're used to my prints that are more representational. I think they're like, oh, they're taken a little aback, but I've always felt supported by people who, in my community and where I'm from and my family, even if they don't understand it, they've always appreciated it. And just thinking of my dad seeing some of these and the pictures he sent me from one of my shows of him standing by the works, but they've always been encouraging and supportive. And I feel like in Fort Yukon, it was, even when I was a little kid, people would say, oh, you're so good at this. This was great. And I mean, it was pretty mediocre, even for a kid, but that encouragement, I've always felt it. And yeah, it's always been good feedback, even if people don't quite grasp it. I feel like they really try to, and at least they, make the effort to, which is really great.
That's good to hear. I think sometimes sharing your work with your closest family can be the hardest audience. So
you feel like you're putting your like I feel like I'm hanging my soul on the wall, and it feels like you're just exposing yourself when you put your work up for a show. Like, no matter how encouraging they are, it's still scary, because when you're an artist, you think, oh, I'm going to work in my studio and be left alone and not have to talk about this or go out, and it's not that way at all.
And here you are on a live stream.
We were fears.
So I just want to say, if anyone in the audience has questions for Colleen, please feel free to type them in the chat. I'm curious just to hear you talk a little bit more generally about your process and your trajectory. So, something I'm always intrigued to hear from artists is how do you find inspiration when you're feeling creatively blocked, or how do you get yourself unstuck? Where do you turn to kind of fill yourself back up again?
Yeah. I was thinking about this because I think I do it without thinking too hard about it and having to process how I was doing that. Well, I read a lot, so that's a little escape for me. Just being outside, like I don't have to be doing anything major, but being outside um, inspires me and it makes me feel relaxed. And but one of the things that I do that I don't really think about is I sit in my studio and I just look at what I have and my materials, and sometimes just sitting there looking at them, and it just helps me to remind me what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and helps me. I don't know, just sitting in quiet. I don't know if a lot of people do that, sit in the quiet and stare at their materials, but I do, and it helps me a lot. But when I need to get re-energized and refocused, it helps me to get out of the studio too. But so I go outside and spend time with my kids and my family, and do other things that aren't so focused inward. Like do volunteer work and get out, and yeah, that helps too. But yeah, I do spend a lot of time just thinking about what I'm doing. Is that a weird answer?
No.
Other artists do that too.
I think sitting and staring at things is a fairly common, or at least I will say that it is.
Just so brutally honest what I do.
um, so what are you working on now, or what do you have coming up? And are there any sort of projects on the horizon, or that are even just in this point in your imagination that you're really excited to work on?
I have this show in August at Wells Street in Fairbanks, and so I'm working towards that. And I always do this where I think, I'll have a show in the fall, and then I don't realize I'm going to be working all summer on it. So I'm working on that, and I'm really thinking about for the next, after the show's over, I really like to focus on learning more, working more with my materials, and maybe more, not exactly sculptural, but I'm interested more in learning more sewing techniques, and like sewing with fish skin and stuff. I want to take the time to do that, just because I've always wanted to do it, but I've never just set aside time to do it. And yeah, I'm interested in more of that kind of actually starting to do some sewing stuff with my materials and exploring different ways to work with these materials. So I don't know how that will look, and I don't know if it'll ever show, but I am excited to try that.
I think that sounds great. Because of all the allusions to sewing that you also have in your work right now. I mean, maybe you could share with the audience a little bit about how you're using patterns often underneath your paintings. I know you spoke about that a little at the beginning, but I think there are so many references to sewing in your paintings.
Yeah, definitely. So the sewing patterns I use are like clothing patterns, like Western style. And I like the idea of mixing that with these traditional native ways of sewing with sinew and fur and quills. I like meshing those two together, because to me that's like, well, that's what I am. And I do enjoy sewing with a sewing machine as well. So, and my mom is a seamstress. She can sew very well with a sewing machine. And so it speaks to both those sides of myself, and merging together, and how there's different ways of approaching things, but they both represent, hard work, and they represent just different ways of looking at the world. But, so many of us are and in those in between places where, you know, we have 2 sides, 3 sides, 4 sides of our background. And I like merging those on the canvas and thinking about it and seeing them together. I really like seeing them together. So yeah, I use a lot of paper patterns. And I do use a lot of paper, just different kinds of paper as well from my printmaking stash of paper. So I do just love paper. Yeah, I think that was the whole question.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. So we're getting close to the end of the hour here. I know we started a bit late, but I have just one or two more questions here for you. And if there's anything else that you want to add or talk about or show the audience while we're on, feel free to chime in and interrupt me here. But I'm curious, you know, as someone who has, sounds like, really been influenced by and nurtured by those adults around you who were supportive of your art practice or who provided models of inspiration, even if they weren't themselves artists like your father. What would be some advice you'd give to a young artist who's just starting out?
Well, always practice. Something I wish somebody would have told me, and I had to figure it out just over time, was that just to take my time finding my own voice, and not to rush it, just because I wanted to produce something. There's nothing wrong with just figuring it out, if that makes sense. There's so much, I feel like there's a lot of pressure to, if you have artistic skill and you want to be an artist, like, well, you should do this, this, and this, and you should produce this much stuff. And I think that's from the outside. It's not necessarily in, like, I don't know, maybe it's just the world we live in where we're moving at a fast pace and we see everybody producing things and we put that pressure on ourselves. But I feel like if you take the time to figure out what you want to say, and what you want to put out in the world and think it over carefully, I think that really helps a lot because you have a direction. And I mean, it took me a while to figure this out. And the things that I made before, I wasn't always inspired by. When I look back, I can tell I was just learning technical stuff or, working my way through it. And I had to work my way through it to get to this point where I feel like I'm using my voice. But yeah, just take the time to figure out what you want to put out there and what you want to say, because the work you put out there is important, and deserves that introspection, that time thinking about it. And I don't know, practice a lot, and try different things, because I started out printmaking and I like to draw. I like to do a lot of other creative things, and I think those all help you find where you fit in there. And it changes over time. And surround yourself with people who are artists or interested in the arts and that can speak honestly to you about your work and encourage you or tell you to get on track. That's really important to have. Not always easy to find, but there's people out there, and there's a lot of supportive people who are knowledgeable about art that don't necessarily create a lot, but they can speak honestly to you and get help.
That's wonderful. I think so much of what you've shared today is super relevant, not only for artists, but just for people of this, taking time to reflect and slow down and be really considerate about the ways that we're working and what we're putting into the world. So great advice to live by, I think.
Life lessons I've learned.
Well, I don't have any more major questions here for you. I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to share with the audience. I know it's I don't know what the weather's like in Fairbanks, but it's a glorious sunny day in Anchorage, which we haven't been having too many of this summer. So I think there'll be more people watching this perhaps in the evening than there are right now. But I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to touch on or share about your work.
I think we covered a lot. I'm not sure though. I just really appreciate that when people do ask me about my work and want to talk about it. Sometimes I feel like people aren't sure what to say or what to ask, and I'm very open to talking about it. And so if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I really appreciate this. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot.
Well, I'm so glad. We've been so fortunate to work with you over this month. And for those who haven't checked it out, be sure to look at Colleen's website, this article that's on our blog. And then there are a series of posts also on the Anchorage Museum Instagram and Facebook, where you can see her talking about different aspects of her process and harvesting some of those roadkill porcupine quills she spoke about earlier. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Colleen, so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.